The global race to complete clinical trials on a COVID-19 vaccine has seen several companies in at least 5 countries attempt to break all records by finding safe and effective treatment by the end of the year. The development of a vaccine usually takes years to complete, but the global coronavirus death toll, now at well over 600,000, has underscored the urgency of this research. Clinical trials for vaccines are currently underway in several countries. Global health experts say the human trials show that the vaccine being tested do not cause any dangerous side effects and could in fact cause a protective response from the human body. South Africa began its first clinical trials in June. Professor Shabir Mahdi is the head of the Oxford University trial here in South Africa. That's where it's taking place amid a steady climb in infections. The Prof joins us now via Skype in Johannesburg. Prof, thanks for your time and welcome to the AM report. Perhaps let's start with the matter which I imagine is, what has sparked a whole lot more interest from South Africans, and that has to do with these clinical trials. How are they going here at home?
So good morning, Ayanda. So the study in South Africa is going reasonably well. We started enrolling the first volunteers about 4 weeks ago. Currently, we're just reaching around about the 500 mark in terms of number of participants that have come onto the study. And the target is to eventually enroll 2,000 participants. We anticipate that we will be able to complete the enrollment of the 2,000 participants by the middle of August. So all of these participants are obviously randomized, which means that they randomly allocated to either receive the vaccine or a placebo. And neither the participants nor the investigators would know which arm the participants are assigned to.
Which is important, right? So since we started speaking about the participants, speak to us about how important community trust is in the development of a vaccine, especially at the rate at which we're trying to do it in the world.
Absolutely. So without community trust, we simply wouldn't be able to be successful in terms of getting people to agree to participate. The places where the study has been done in South Africa are research units that have got a long history of doing research in those communities, of having engaged with those communities, and the communities do have trust in these investigators. As an example, in my own research unit, we have been here for 25 years. And in that 25 years, we've done more than 20 different vaccine studies. So we've definitely developed a relationship with the community, and that's the reason why it's reasonably easy for us to basically engage with them and for them to actually come forward to volunteer participation.
Prof, we've also come across reports of some people, showing signs of being reinfected by the virus, as in you get infected, you go through symptoms, you recover. At some stage you test negative, but eventually you're able to test positive again and go through the entire process of going through symptoms. How accurate are these reports? And if they are relatively accurate, how does that complicate the race to try and find a vaccine?
Right, so there's 2 parts to it. So in terms of first principles, when a person is exposed to a pathogen, a virus, a bacteria for the first time, on that first occasion, there's a time when a person is most likely to develop the most severe disease. And the reason a person recovers from it is because the immune system has basically developed immunity against the virus and is able to clear the virus from the body. Now, once that immunity has developed, it doesn't protect the person necessarily from becoming reinfected, but what it would protect the person against is developing severe disease from the reinfection. So the immunity that initially arises doesn't necessarily protect you against reinfection, so it's completely biologically plausible for people to be reinfected. But in terms of first principles, the subsequent infections will result in much less severe disease. Now, when it comes to the vaccines, there's the possibility that the vaccine could prevent reinfection. Very unlikely. There's very few vaccines that actually prevent infection. Vaccines are much more effective in terms of preventing people from developing severe disease. And an additional potential advantage or benefit of a vaccine is that what it could do is that when a person becomes infected, it can reduce the time period over which that person will shed the virus. Now, that is extremely important because there's a concept known as herd immunity, which means that if you're able to interrupt the transmission of the virus in a community when a certain percentage of the population have become immune, you basically will get very, very much less disease. You'll get a greater benefit from that vaccine than in the absence of that herd immunity evolving. So with the vaccine is unlikely to protect against infection, but it's very likely to protect against severe disease, and it possibly could sort of interrupt the transmission of the virus from one person to another.
Given that, then we've also heard that, of course, the virus responds very differently to different people. So people with comorbidities, for instance, and those who are elderly typically have a much harsher experience, for lack of a better term, than those who don't. Is that because of, I guess, the people's defenses, or because, in fact, the virus itself behaves differently in different people?
Yeah, so it's probably a combination of factors. The one part, as you mentioned, is that many of those individuals with comorbidities do have some suppression of their immune response or dysregulation in terms of their immune response to the infection. But in addition to that, many of those conditions, such as hypertension, such as smoking, as an example, upregulates what is known as the ACE2 receptor. Now, that's a very important receptor on the human cells, which allows the virus to gain entry into the human cells. So if there's an upregulation of those ACE2 receptors, the chances are that a person can become more severely ill because of the infection. So it's probably a combination of what's happening in terms of the ability of the virus to sort of invade into the cells, as well as the inability of the immune system to respond in a measured way against the infection.
Prof, I am out of time, but now that, most of the euphoria has kind of died down around this major first step in the Oxford University study, are we able to, I guess, in a much more sober way, speak about timelines? And I'm more interested in the end product here. When can, I guess, the global community expect, realistically speaking, the rollout of a fully fledged, completed vaccine?
Well, that largely depends on whether these vaccines are shown to be effective in protecting against COVID-19. In terms of the timelines when we'll have an answer to that question, it again differs between places because it depends how quickly people become infected that are participating in a study. In South Africa, as an example, we anticipate that we would probably be able to get an answer to that question around about December of this year. But after that, there's a whole complex process in terms of the manufacturing of the vaccines, in terms of the ability to scale up production, in terms of the ability to actually deploy the vaccine in the field. And that itself is another long road. So just in terms of when we might get an answer about whether the vaccine works or not, we're hoping to be able to address that question, at least in South Africa, by the end of this year, and possibly the same in the UK and Brazil for the same vaccine.
Thank you very much for your time. Certainly appreciate your insights. Professor Shabir Mahdi is a vaccinologist at Wits University. Appreciate your insights indeed.